to ensure meaningful learning. This organizing committee considers that there are still enriching areas and issues that have remained unexplored. For this reason, we are honored to welcome today distinguished specialists in the field of English teaching. Master Andrea Lazo de la Vega Moreno from Oxford University Press, Master Claire Goodman Goodchild, and Master Jonathan Elizondo Mejias from Universidad Estatal a Distancia, Master Nancy Reeves from Pearson Education, and Dr. Pearlie Lubin from the U.S. Department of State. We are very honored to have you here with us. Let us have a round of applause for these special guests. So, without delay, let us begin our 8th seminar for English teaching professionals. Thank you.
Thank you, Master Harley, for your words. Now, to begin our program, we are delighted to welcome the group Ensamble de Percusión de Costa Rica from Universidad Estatal a Distancia. Founded in 1993, this group has performed in some of the most prestigious music halls of the country, such as Teatro Nacional, and has shared their impressive musical talent in well-known stages in the United States, Spain, Chile, Holland, Japan, and Colombia. This group received the national accolade of music as best musical ensemble group in 2010, the highest award given by the Ministerio de Cultura y Juventud of Costa Rica. This group has been part of UNED since 2008. Now, they will perform 3 pieces. The first piece is called Farándula, composed by Georges Bizet and arranged by Omar Musser. The second piece they will perform is called Mario Bros, arranged by Ricardo Alvarado. And the third is called Song, composed by Marvin Araya. So please, let's give them a round of applause. Well, that was impressive, don't you think? Okay, so now before we start with the academic activities, we want to share with you some important instructions. First, in case of an emergency, there are 3 exits in this room. Leave the building in order and follow the instructions of the campus officials. Second, set your cell phones to vibrate to avoid interruptions. Third, make sure you have signed the attendance list and the meal control list, very important, at the front desk. And 4, If you want to ask a question at the end of a presentation, raise your hand and wait for the assistant to hand you a microphone. Stand up, say your full name, and speak clearly into the microphone. 5, you will be able to have access to the recorded plenaries and interviews on our website in the upcoming weeks. 6, in order to receive the digital certification, you have to participate in all the plenary sessions and workshops and fill in an evaluation form at the end of the seminar. You will find a QR code posted on different walls in this room, and we will also project it on the screen at the end of the closing ceremony. The certification of participation will be sent to the email account you typed when you registered for the seminar. And finally, for breaks and lunch, have your tickets handy. Okay, so now it's time to start our open plenary entitled Developing Authentic Tasks in the EFL Classroom by Dr. Pearlie Lubin. Dr. Pearlie Lubin is an ESL educator from Miami, Florida, with over 16 years of experience. She has taught English language learners in Florida, Texas, and virtually in Costa Rica during the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Lubin has taught English to adult learners at colleges, a parent academy, and in a virtual high school English club. She has actively served in her TESOL community, and she is a past president of Texas TESOL Region 5. In all her work environments, she seeks to create a dynamic learning community and inspire others to achieve their goals. Currently, she is an English language fellow with the U.S. Department of State. In this opportunity, Dr. Lubin will explain how we can integrate culturally responsive teaching practices when creating authentic tasks that respect students' diverse backgrounds. By the end, you will understand your role in fostering a positive and effective educational experience. So with that, let us give a warm welcome to Dr. Pearlie Lubin.
Get my timer going here. Good morning, everyone. Ooh, after all of that good music, all I get is a good morning. Good morning, everyone. Let me feel you this morning. And I want to say thank you. Thank you to the organizing committee for putting together such a great conference. I would also like to thank Pamela and the team for all of the graphics. Isn't this a beautiful thing? Makes me look good, right? So I do want to say thank you for all that you've done, and I really appreciated the band. And I thank you for introducing me so nicely. I sound so good. I want to start by just sharing a couple of things today. We are going to be talking about 3 different things. I'm going to ask you to please look in with me. So we're going to be looking in. I'm going to ask you to look at. I'll tell you who and what. And then I'm going to ask you to look around. So those are the 3 things that we'll be discussing in the next hour. Can everyone hear me clearly? Good. So we're looking in, but I'm starting off with this weird-looking bird. Has anyone ever seen this before? I promise you, the bird is not hurt. It's not hurt. But it is strange to see a bird looking back. So I want to tell you a little bit about this bird. This is called the Sankofa bird, and I had a chance to spend a little bit of time in Ghana. My brother-in-law is from Ghana, and we all went to visit, and I kept seeing this bird everywhere. And what I've learned is that the Akan people of Ghana will use different symbols to represent a proverb. So what you see is the Sankofa bird, and what this bird represents is that it's important for us to look back at what has happened in the past, to reflect on it, to think about what's happening in the present before we go on into the future. So this one bird is sharing a proverb: stop, look back, look at the present, and then move forward. So what I'm going to ask you to do with me this morning is to stop, to look back, and then we're going to look at the present, and then we'll move forward. Okay? So to start, I'd like to talk about teacher identity. You might say, I know who I am. I have my ID. But when I talk about teacher identity, the definition here is how teachers see themselves and their role in the classroom. So I ask you, how do you see yourself in terms of your values, in terms of your beliefs, and your cultural background? I'd like you to think about that for a moment. How do you see yourself? What do you think about yourself? And the reason I ask this question is you might say, what does this have to do with teaching? I'm here for a teaching seminar. Why are you asking me to look at myself? Well, research shows that when your sense of self affects what happens in the classroom. So if you have accepted yourself, you have explored who you are, your own identity as a person, and you have been affirmed in that, then you are more likely to respect other people, such as students in a classroom. What is the impact? Two things. First, self-awareness. Teachers who are confident in who they have a better understanding of who their students are and how to address student needs. I like to put it this way. It's a matter of pain or gain. The pain that we carry because of the shame of who we are, our backgrounds, that comes out into the classroom. The same way that the confidence we feel about who we are, that is transmitted in the classroom as well. So how we feel about ourselves is going to be transmitted in the classroom. We have to decide whether we want that to be a matter of pain or a matter of gain. So what I'm really talking about here is equitable pedagogy, meaning just fairness in the classroom, fairness for all students. So the thing about equity pedagogy is a belief that teachers can empower all students to learn, regardless of background. And how do teachers do this? What is it about them? Well, they create a equitable learning environment, a fair learning environment, because they themselves have something called cultural competency. And in essence, what that means is that it's the belief that there are different ways of knowing. There's not one way of doing things, but there are different ways, and different cultures, different perspectives bring all of that into the classroom. Well, when a person feels that they can share their cultural background, their experience in a classroom, it actually is connected to student achievement. So this idea of looking back at who we are, it's going to affect what's going to happen in the classroom. So what does that look like? I'm talking about this as theoretical, but what does that actually look like? Well, one model of equity pedagogy is culturally responsive teaching. Now, I'm a big fan of this woman called Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, and this is one model. There are many, but I fangirl over her anytime I see anything she's written because she believes there are three components to culturally responsive teaching, and I'll tell you about those. But what does a teacher look like? Well, teachers who are proponents of culturally relevant teaching are self-aware. They're aware of who they are, first. Secondly, they create a community in the classroom. When the students come in, it's not this foreign, scary place, but it's almost like coming to a second home. The other thing is they hold that knowledge is flexible and contestable, which means that there's not always one way of doing things. There's different ways of accomplishing the same goal. And what Gloria Ladson-Billings says is that there are three components to culturally responsive teaching. Remember, this is just one model, but in her model, the first is academic success. It's the belief that you can help students succeed and working towards that. The second is cultural competence. We mentioned that before, but cultural competence is affirmed in your own culture and then respecting other cultures. And it comes out in the classroom. The third is what she calls critical consciousness. We might think of it as critical thinking skills. When you look at the definition, what is it? It's thinking critically to find solutions to real-world problems. Isn't that something that we all want our students to be able to do? Now, this is one model. And again, I'm a proponent, I love her, but it's not the only model. TESOL International also has 6 principles that they offer in culturally responsive teaching, and I want to talk about those 6 principles here. The first principle is to know your learners. When you think about Knowing your learners, first day of school, we always ask about vacation, how are you, what did you do? But it doesn't have to be a one-time thing. In my classes, generally Mondays are time for us to just talk. So every Monday, I take a few minutes and I ask students, how was your weekend? That's just the one question. At first, they're like, fine. I'm like, no, what did you do? And so then they'll tell me, oh, I went to the park, I went to church, I worked with older students, so one told me that I go to my mother-in-law's house every weekend for dinner. But that tells me something. So what I do is I listen to these, and after they get comfortable, I stop asking them, how was your weekend? I let them ask each other. So I walk around while they're having conversations, and I'm taking notes. And I'm learning so much about my students. I know exactly who plays with their dogs, who goes to their grandmother's house, who goes mountain biking every single weekend with his boys, you know? So this, I get to know my learners, and I use all of that. The second is create conditions for language learning. This is sometimes difficult because I understand in some classrooms, you're not allowed to put things on the walls. Well, that's what happened when I went to one class where I was told, you cannot put up anything on the walls permanently. So I thought, this is gonna be hard. So what did I do? I got butcher paper, big sheets of paper. I wrote my notes, and then I folded it up. I bring it to class, I tape it on the wall. And then when I leave, I untape it, I fold it back again, I put it in my bag. But that does a couple of things. One, I'm able to give my students the language they need to communicate, but also I'm respecting the authority of the school where I am serving. I'm not gonna leave anything up, but I give my students what they need. So when you think about your environment, think, oh, I can't put anything up. Well, you can, just make sure you take it off. Another is design high-quality lessons for language development. We want to make this practical. We're thinking, we live in the 21st century. We got to think about what is it that's going to help our students in their local culture. So using those things, whatever we learn from point one, knowing our learners, bring that into the classroom, teaching them how to use different technology. This one we all know and we all do it, but we have to assess and adapt. What worked for one semester and one group of students, and you're like, yes, this was great, the best thing in the world. Next semester, not so much. So we have to adapt it. We have to change it. Students are different. The other is to monitor and assess student language development. Every student does not learn at the same pace. So are we differentiating the learning? Do we have two versions of the same activity for those who need a little bit more time and those who need less time? So differentiating the activities is one way of doing that. And I remember I had Project A and Project B. They're essentially the same thing, but Project B, you had to explain a little bit more of a sequence and the steps of how to do something versus just telling me information about it, because that's where my students were. And the last is to engage and collaborate with a community at practice. This has been one of the best things for me. I lived in Texas for 15 years. And when I first arrived, I didn't really know a lot of teachers, except the ones in my school, but my supervisor invited me to a TESOL regional conference. I thought, okay. I went to this conference and it just changed everything for me. I got to learn so many things from other teachers. They shared the best practices, but they also shared their mistakes. So one of the things about a community practice is when you go, you're taking notes, you're learning new strategies, but I was part of that for a couple of years, and then I was very involved, and then they had an opening. They said, hey, we need somebody to represent this region and to do different things, and I thought, I can do that. So I volunteered. Well, what did that do for me? People are looking at me as an expert, and I don't know everything, but guess what? I work with a lot of other people who do. So I learned from them, and what I learned from them, I was able to share it within my region. So when you think about a community practice, it doesn't mean you have all the answers. It just means that you're working with other people who love teaching. So why do this? When we think about the benefits of culturally responsive teaching, it boils down to two things: student engagement and student learning. And you say, really? This one method does all of that? Well, you might not believe me, but let me just share some things with you. So again, going back to the rock star, Dr. Ladson-Billings, who I love, she wrote an article called, "But That's Just Good Teaching." What she did is she is a researcher and a teacher, and she studied an elementary school of teachers and students in a low-income area in the United States. She studied them for 3 years, and she observed, what are these teachers doing? She also spoke to the principal, because in selecting the teachers, I will say this, she didn't just go and decide, okay, these are the best teachers. She asked the principals, assistant principals of the school, who are the best teachers and why? The principal said, these are our best teachers. Why? These teachers have low discipline problems. These teachers have high attendance. And the test scores, you're thinking, wow, that's great. I want to talk to these teachers. But she didn't stop there. Then she talked to the parents. She said, I want you to tell me who are the best teachers at the school. And the parents said, oh, we can tell you. These teachers, our kids, they want to go to school. They want to learn. On top of that, these teachers respect the students in the class. The third thing is, the teacher did not tell the students, you must speak this way and only this way. Why is that important? This is the United States, right? Well, this is a low-income, predominantly black school. And for those who may not know, there's something called Ebonics. So it's Black American English. It's English, but a little bit different. How would I explain that? I live in Limon right now, Limon, Costa Rica. So it's almost like the Caribbean English versus Standard English. They're similar, but not the same. What these teachers did is they didn't tell the students, you can only speak Standard English. One teacher said, you know what? You can write in your dialect. You can use it. But afterwards, I want you to translate everything that you said into Standard English, because I want you to be prepared for the larger world, because everybody doesn't speak your language. So they didn't disrespect the language, but they encouraged students to be prepared for every opportunity that comes. There's more. The third thing these teachers did is that they got the parents involved. And you might wonder, what does this have to do with the lesson? Well, let me tell you what she did. She used to have this thing called a visiting scholar. So she would invite a parent to come to her class over a period of time, and she asked the parent to come in and teach anything you know. You're the scholar, so whatever you know, please come teach us something. She'd prepare in advance, and one parent said, well, I didn't go to university, I don't have all this training. And she said, but what can you do? And she says, well, I can make pies. And she said, really? Would you come to our class and teach our students how to make pies? So she prepared a 2-day session with the visiting scholar for 1 or 2 hours over 2 days. The first day, the mother came and she taught the students how to make a crust. So they put the flour and the water and everything and they rolled it out and they made their crust the first day and they put it in the refrigerator. The second day, she taught them how to make the filling with sweet potatoes. After they did that, of course, they ate the pie. But that's not where the story ended. We thanked the parent, they went home. Then the teacher continued with them. And so she asked them to do research. She asked them to research, how do you grow sweet potato? Well, excuse me, first, what is the main ingredient in the sweet potato pie? Sweet potato. Then, how do you grow sweet potatoes? What kind of soil? What kind of water? How long does it take? She didn't stop there. Then she asked them to research what are the different things and products that can come from a sweet potato. The students had to research. Now, this is years ago. This study was in the 90s, so we didn't have Google like we do now. So they had to go to encyclopedias and look things up. She wasn't done. After they ate, they had a taste test, and then they decided to see, how could we market a sweet potato business? What do we need? How much money do we need? How much will we sell these potatoes for? How much money are we going to make? All of this, and she wasn't done. Then she introduced them to George Washington Carver. He was a scientist and inventor, American scientist and inventor, and he developed over 100 uses for the sweet potato. All of this started with her inviting a parent to a class to teach students how to make a sweet potato pie. Why is that important? With culture responsive teaching, again, you want to make it relevant. This lady was known in the community for her pies. She didn't have a university degree, but she was a scholar in what she knew how to do. She used that. So what the students learned is that, wow, what happens in my community is important. What I do in my community is important. And I can learn. So I just give a couple lists here of the different things that the teacher taught from this one sweet potato pie lesson. And you notice I mentioned soft skills. You're like, okay, where did soft skills come in? Well, let me tell you. After this lesson, after every lesson, every visiting scholar, all of the students had to write a thank you note to the visiting scholar. How do you think the parent felt receiving all of these letters from students saying, thank you, the pie was good, and I really enjoyed this, and the parent feels good. Not only that, you're teaching students how to be grateful, how to be thankful, and also some writing skills, right? So all of this from a sweet potato pie. Imagine what can happen here in Costa Rica with all the other wonderful foods here. Now, I have to tell you, this sounds really wonderful, but there's another story I want to share. That was Gloria Ladson-Billings. In my own class, I didn't start off using culturally responsive teaching. I didn't know. I remember I used to have a project where I asked my students to do an American Experience project. They would have to videotape themselves going out into the community and speaking English in natural settings. So you could buy and return an item to a store. You can order your meal at a restaurant, and some of my students say, oh, Ms. Lubin, I don't have time, blah, blah, blah. I said, what do you do? One student said, I'm a hairdresser. I said, really? I said, ask permission and record yourself having a conversation with one of your clients on getting her hair done. She did. So usually after these projects, they have to write a reflection, they share with the class, show the video, and then we discuss what went well, what was difficult, what would you like to do next time? Well, when I asked the question, what would you like to do next time, I had a Syrian student in my class, and he said, I have something. And I said, what would you like to do next time? He said, I want to talk about my culture. And I thought, oh, what would you like to tell us about your culture? And he said, I don't know, but I want to talk about my culture. And so I thought, I need to work on that. So I developed a project called My Town, where students shared, if we were to visit you, where should we go? What should we do? And of course, I had a version A and a version B. And in my second version, I asked, what are the national crops? What's the national dish? And for the advanced version, please demonstrate to us or give us the steps on how to make that national dish, one item of it. So more advanced students can explain things. Now, the interesting thing is that I had a student who is an engineer. Now, remember, I work with adults. And he said, I know how to mine. So he showed us the steps, drawings, he had the videos and the PowerPoint and everything on how to mine silver in Mexico. So it's really interesting to see what they come up with. And so that really opened my eyes to making sure that I always included that in my class, but it didn't stop there. The other thing I used to do is that I would ask the other teachers, the people from the lab, and the administrators to come to my class, and then after the demonstration to have a conversation, because I lived in Texas. They love to have small talks, barbecue parties, etc. So if students brought something, the administrators knew to ask questions like, oh, what is this? Tell us about it. And the students would have to share concisely. Don't give me the whole long story. What is this food? Especially food, because people have different diets. So, oh, this is a salad. Oh, it's vegetarian. Oh, there's beef in here. Oh, there's pork in here. So things like that, because they're going to go out to work and they're going to be invited to parties, and I want them to not stand in the corner like this, but to be able to communicate with others. So I am grateful to Gloria Ladson-Billings, and now you know why. Now, I have to say that there are some challenges. So people will say, like, I don't want to do this because, I'll tell you why. First, people say personal bias. They don't want to talk about other cultures because they don't respect them. A lack of training. They don't know how to do this. Lack of parental involvement, but I just showed you how it can happen with a sweet potato pie. It's time-consuming, and also a lack of access to materials. And that brings us to the second portion of today's talk, which is authentic materials, something that we want to talk about here. So first, I want to share that before we go on, why bother if it's so hard? Remember, student engagement, student learning. That's what we're aiming for. So we want to talk authentic materials. And when I mention that, what is that? It's just real-life materials. And these are some of my pictures that I've used. So my ticket, this is my receipt from the bus to come to San Jose from Limon. And I had an opportunity to go to Brazil, so this is feijoada. So I learned here, I have to be careful because I've put on some weight eating in Costa Rica because the casada, my gosh. But then, this is feijoada, so comparison contrast between the two meals. And then, of course, the other thing I learned is that they use a different adapter in Brazil, so different and yet similarities, connections, right? Why authentic materials? Why bother? Interesting to students, it's something useful, that's the point. It's useful, and also it's a chance to review new vocabulary and concepts. And when selecting authentic materials, there's so many options. There's podcasts, there's images, we have magazines, we have recipes. So there are a lot of different opportunities to use authentic materials. But there are some things to consider when using them that are very, very important. One is the learning focus. What's the focus of this lesson? We don't want to get so caught up, and this is so much fun, but we forget the reason that we're doing this. So the language skills and what resources are the students going to need to help them. Secondly, what is the proficiency level? What scaffolding are the students going to need to be able to help them use the material? This is really important. Is there any opportunity for students to use English in their daily life? If there is, focus on that. That's where you want to use the lesson. But if they're not, how can you make it interesting to them? And going back to that, student interest. They have to be interested in the topic. So these are some things to consider when using any authentic materials. And so I'd like you to take a moment and just turn to your partner and answer this question. What are some authentic materials you have used in your classroom? So please, turn to each other and ask, what have you used in your classroom? Okay, time's up. We're moving on. I'm just going to take one or two. Anybody want to just tell one or two people can tell us what is something you've used in your class? Anyone want to share? Anyone bold enough to speak up? Yes, please. Oh, no, I saw your hand up. No? Yes. Oh, okay.
Morning, everyone. Well, I guess this is an activity that many of us use in class. Is vintage sale. So I asked them to bring like things that they have at home that they don't use anymore, and they have them for sale. And it's a day in which everybody has to use like prices and comparative and superlative to try to convince the partners about to sell and buy and shop and what is the best to shop online, shop in a store, things like that.
Nice.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, some authentic materials that I used was like menus, some electronic device, and some toys, depending on the topic that we were talking.
Okay, so relevant. They like the toys, using technology, and also I like the competitive nature of your example right there. That was really cool. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Now, in developing culturally responsive materials, we're going to talk about a couple of things to consider. One is, of course, selecting relevant, something that's relevant, technology, toys, something that they're interested in. And so we're going to do a little practice together here. So we have a lesson. And we have a challenge if you choose to accept it. And here, we're going to do a lesson. I'm going to ask you to help think about a lesson on food and money. And the objective is to practice vocabulary related to food, money, and social interactions. So I'm going to ask you again to talk to your partners and answer two questions. What lesson would you create? And number two, what are some authentic materials you could use for such a lesson? So please, share with your partners. Okay, thank you for sharing. And so I'd like to ask one or two people to please share, what are your thoughts? If you'd like to share, what lesson would you create? What would it be based on? What materials would you use for the lesson? Anyone want to share? Anyone bold enough to talk? Your teachers, I know you have ideas in your head.
We were talking here that maybe creating a farmer's market inside of the classroom. So divide the group in two, and some are the buyers, some are the sellers, and they talk about food, and it's related to money, social interactions in a farmer's market, and very Costa Rican as well, right?
Very nice, very nice. Oh, one over here.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We have something in here that is called pulperia, which is like a small grocery. So I would bring to the class, or ask them to bring into the class, like little snack, right? Specs or cookies or gummies or stuff like that. So they will sell them between them, and they can share. I mean, one of them can be the seller, the other one can be the buyer. They can put price on it, like the other example the other teacher gave us, and so on and so forth. So, because I've seen it working, like the pulperia, and that's great. They really enjoy it, they have fun, they share it, they liked it, so.
Very good, very good. Thank you for suggesting these things. And you're right. I love those two suggestions, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But regardless of which you choose or whatever ideas you have, these are some things you might want to consider in using authentic materials. Fruits and vegetables, real or fake. Some price tags and talking about money, fake money. Shopping bags, but also some signs with vocabulary words like apples and carrots. So we talked about using something relevant. The next thing we want to discuss, and I love these ideas and coming back to that market, is to activate background knowledge with the students. Now, I will share this. I love the fact that you said farmer's market, and I'll tell you why. This is actually a farmer's market in Texas. This is in Grand Prairie. Now, when I move to a new place, I'm a foodie, so I need to know where's the food. And so in Grand Prairie, Texas, we have this farmer's market, but I'll tell you something else. When I first moved to Limon, we drove into Limon. And when you're driving in from San Jose, one of the things you see on the right-hand side is La Feria, right? And so when I saw that, I was like, what's that? They're like, oh, that's the open-air market. I said, that's where I need to be. And then when I speak to my students and asking questions, everybody goes to La Feria. Everybody knows about it. So again, for my particular context where I am, this would work, or something like it. Now, activating background knowledge. Now, I am using farmer's market. For you, you might put something else in that circle. You might put the local store that you had mentioned. It's up to you. But this is something I would do, and as I'm talking out loud, students are watching this, they'll create their own, but I'll say farmer's market. What do I know about a farmer's market? Oh, we have fruits and vegetables there. We need money to shop there. Also, we might need some words to describe things like the color and size of the food. So maybe things like big and small and ripe. We might also need to learn some shopping phrases like, how much is this? I'd like, and thank you, right? So I just created a word map, and the word map can be virtual or on paper. It would be nice to let students use some of their own native language or just images. And lastly, again, you could demonstrate this, but then have them create their own. And this could be for any topic. So the lesson introduction, we would start off with vocabulary, and then we would discuss what is a farmer's market, what happens there, right? And then we would review the word maps, the ones that they created. Another thing to consider is leaving the word maps up on the wall. Bless you. Now again, if the administrator does not want things up on the wall, everything has to go down by the end of the lesson, and maybe keep them for the next day. But put them up on the wall so they can refer to that vocabulary as they're working on their farmer's market. So here, turning that classroom into a farmer's market, visually helping them see it. And as you mentioned, some people mentioned, having the two groups, the vendors who are setting up the stalls and where the food is going to go, and the shoppers and what questions they're going to ask. Afterwards, of course, you want to take some time to do reflection, and that can take place in different ways. We can do drawings, of course, and I personally love exit tickets. So afterwards, what went well with this lesson? And they can write about it or talk about it. What was difficult? What was hard about this lesson? And one of my favorite questions is, what do you think you should do next? What should we do next? To help them think about that. And of course, a poster or collage. The last thing I would also encourage is a class wall, is a wall of hangings, thank you. And really it's just, again, that butcher paper, if you can't leave things up. But having a piece of paper up or on the board, having students say 1 or 2 things that they learned from this. So keeping that up so they can see it. We talked about the content, the background, and now we want to talk about pre-selecting vocabulary because this is some authentic material, maybe an article that you're using. So when using print material, the day before the lesson, I encourage you or have the students look at the print material, the story, the news article, and circle any words that they don't know. After they've done that, then the next day, the day in class, put this on the board, 4 columns, word, example, sentence, my guess, and definition, and then have them write this in their notebooks and say, the first one we're going to look at is this picture right here. So they look at the picture, what do you see in the picture, and then afterwards, write basket on the first and have them write basket. Now they may know what it is, they may not know what it is, but tell them it's in this picture. And then afterwards, a sentence. Have them copy, I put my apples in a basket. After doing this, then they have to guess what is a basket. And in that 3rd column, they could write a definition, they could draw a picture, whatever it is. After the class has done this, then we can have 1 or 2 people look up what is basket, and then they have a formal definition of what a basket is. So this is just another way of pre-selecting and reviewing vocabulary to give them a chance to think about it, instead of always, teacher, what does this mean? In Spanish, you know? So content, background, pre-selecting vocabulary, and now boosting understanding. One way of doing this is by chunking material. So if I asked the students to read this and then answer some questions about it, they could, but wouldn't this be easier by chunking it? And then I can ask more specific questions about sections. So I can ask, where did Tala go? She walked in a forest. What did Tala find in the forest? I can ask her, what did Tala do when she went home? It's a lot easier. It's the same questions, but it's a lot easier for them to see the material. So sometimes the article will come like this. It does take a little bit of work, but imagine the engagement and understanding by doing it like this. Another thing is information exchange. These are actually my bus tickets. So I live, in Limon, you know, and the bus route that I use, the bus route I learned is the Limon Via del Mar. But Monday through Saturday, if you look at 8:30 a.m., Monday through Saturday is the Playa bus. Playa will take me to town in 15 minutes. So Playa, 15 minutes. On Sunday, 8:30, no, Pista. Pista takes an hour. It's not the same. So imagine if I gave one student the Monday through Saturday, okay, for Playa, and the other one gets Sunday, Pista. And then I ask, how long will it take me to get to town? These students are going to tell me, 15 minutes, 8:45. These students will tell me, oh, 9:30. If I say you're both right, how can that be? Well, then they're going to look at the information together versus if I just gave them the schedule and say, what time does the bus go by? Kind of boring, right? But that little exchange, then they'll start paying attention. Oh, the day matters because the bus route changes. I had to learn this the hard way. A third consideration with boosting understanding is different tasks. Everyone doesn't have to do the same thing. I'm sorry if this is a little bit small, but it's a menu. And so in this menu, I could ask student A or students from group A, find the price of a side salad. And they'll find the price. Student B, I could ask them a different question. Find the least expensive drinks. Now you might say, why didn't she say least expensive drink singular? Because I read the menu and there are 3 drinks that are $1.95. Milk, water, and tea, coffee, tea, and milk. So we have to make sure we're ready and prepared. But I know there are 3 drinks that are $1.95, so there are 3 drinks that they can get for that price. And then group C, I could ask them, if you had $10 or 5,000 colones, what could you buy with that? So just different questions to ask, but they're learning and they're engaging with the material. So these are just 3 different ways to chunk material, to exchange activity, do information exchange, and also different tasks for boosting understanding. So we talked about content, background knowledge, vocabulary, and now we want to talk about developing, evaluating activities. How do you evaluate this material? What do you do? Before doing that, please consider that you want to think about some things. What is the deadline for this lesson or project? When is it going to be completed? What vocabulary do they need to know? But also, what language structures are you going to be evaluating? Is it grammar? Is it punctuation? Is it capitalization? So all of those are things to consider as you're preparing the lesson. And then I want to share some examples of different ways to evaluate a lesson. Assess a lesson. So of course, there's also the skit, like we mentioned, with the farmer's market, developing a poster about what's to come, a song, a poem, or even a rap, if they're comfortable, a short news summary, a day trip. Now, I did this with a group of students where I'm in Limon, right? And so I asked them, I would like you to help me create a live tour guide. What does that mean? Excuse me, a live tour manual. So each student, I asked the students to, if they had one day and they had a budget, what are 3 things we can do in one day? Because the bus, you want to make sure you put the bus time in between. So 2 places to go, 1 place to eat. And so they had to calculate the distance between these places, the bus time to get from one place to another. And then once they did, they also had to work on who's going to do the introduction. So one person made a video like, hey, welcome to Limon. Do you want to have a good time? Join our tour, because I had 3 different tour companies in the class. And though the second person would say, well, our day, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. The next person can share about the distances and how long it would take. And then another person would share, what do you need for the day? Please bring water. Wear sandals. It will be hot. So different things like that. But rather than write it, I had them videotape themselves, I had them video, and I used Padlet. But they had a whole little video series on a live tour. And so that way, they voted on which one was the best tour for the day. A speech, this one, if we're talking about critical thinking skills, imagine if a student told you, well, my opinion is, we talked about last week in my English club, we talked about cell phone usage in class. And what do they think students should do? Is it a good idea to use cell phones or not? One group said yes, because we can find information much quicker. Another group said no, because then students aren't paying attention to the teacher, and so their test scores are going to go low because they don't know what information they need from class, et cetera, et cetera. So they came up with these things, not me. But we just talked about cell phones in class, and I asked them to make sure they support whatever they said. And of course, letters. And a presentation is always good. So in developing materials, you talked about something relevant, activating background knowledge, vocabulary, boosting understandings by chunking, etc. And we talked about developing, evaluating activities. Now, 3 things we did today. I asked you to start by looking in with me. And so we looked at identity. And I just want to underline the fact that we are the gatekeepers. When students are coming into the class, we don't know what family they're coming from. We don't know what's happening there. But when they come in, we can decide what this environment is going to be like. Is it going to be welcoming? Are we going to prepare them for what's to come in the future? So we are their gatekeepers. We looked in and importance of, remember, we're bringing to class pain or gain. We looked at culture responsive teaching and my favorite person, Dr. Laura Latson-Billings, but we looked at teacher-student background as a resource and the importance of respecting all cultures, that if there's a different dialect, it's not wrong, it's different, but we want to prepare our students for the wider society, right? And third, I asked you to please look around. There are online resources available, print resources of all kinds, brochures, etc., community resources, and that includes parents. But lastly, I want to share, and again, go back to the gatekeeper, we're the resource. I just shared with you, my short time in Limon, I have bus tickets, I have brochures, all kinds of things, and I'm sure you have them as well. So you are an amazing and important resource in the class. And so I just want to leave you, when you think about authentic materials, starts and ends with us, right, as teachers. So thank you for listening.
Hello. Okay, thank you very much. No, don't step down. So, thank you very much for your presentation. We come now to the Q&A session. So we will have a 10-minute Q&A session. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and the microphone runners that we have will go to you, and you can ask your question. Just try to be as concise as possible. And remember to stand up when you're asking your question. So let's see, who has a question for Ms. Lubin?
Hi, my name is Diana, and my question is, what's your favorite story about you using authentic materials?
That's a good question. Actually, a picture of my family. I use that because I didn't do it in this presentation, but usually I like to use it to talk about my background a little bit, because when people see me, they think, oh, she's an American, she speaks English, but they don't know that I speak other languages, that my parents were immigrants, that they had that experience, and even though I am not an immigrant, I have moved from Miami, Florida to Dallas, Texas, and I cannot tell you that when I moved to Texas, I had to learn a new language, a new English. So just sharing those experiences and finding those connections, and then I ask students sometimes to bring pictures of their family, and sometimes they don't have them, and I say that's fine. Use stick people, draw something, show us something, and then we talk about that. So I like to build community in my class and find those connections and just sharing about my family.
Thank you for your talk.
Thank you.
My name is Veronica Ogilbe.
Morning.
And I had a question regarding teaching culturally transforming activities in class. When we use authentic material, what we find from Limon, for example, is recipes. Like everything is biased. Recipes, and we're reduced just to dancing and things like this. How do we stay away from essentialism? Since like the very low performing students, let's say first year students in a program in which we have to teach the five, food, fashion, flags, and these things. How do we include information that is culturally sensitive and not just generalizations or stereotypes of the country?
That's a really good question. I don't have as much experience as you do in teaching the classes here, but I ask students to tell me what do they have. Before we do that, I usually have a lesson where we learn two words, agree and disagree. And I said that if you come in and you tell me something, oh, I don't know, apples from Siqueiros are the best. If I look at you and say, are you crazy? Oh, you're so stupid. I said, how would you feel? I said, but if I say I disagree, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying you're wrong. I said, you have one opinion, one idea. I have a different idea. So one of the things in the beginning of class, when we established class rules, is we learned I agree and I disagree. And we use those terms in class because we have different opinions, and it doesn't mean that it's wrong or bad, it's just that my opinion is different. And so we practice that a little bit in class, so later on, and someone will also always say, oh no, I said, remember, the other students will say, oh no, disagree. So we talk about that first in establishing an environment of respect in the class, so I don't have the bullying going on later on because someone likes something different. And it's another reason why I like to share a little bit about my background, because I lived in Texas where beef and potatoes were very popular, but my family's from the island of Haiti. I come from a rice culture. So when I moved to Texas, I know all the Thai restaurants, all the Vietnamese restaurants, because they're rice cultures. So things like that. So it's starting off by just myself and sharing the different things I've done and eaten, but also giving them the language of respect and letting them know that in this space right here, we respect people. So if I ask someone to share something about themselves, we're not going to disrespect them. We're going to respect that we have different ways of doing things. I would start with that, an environment of respect.
Thank you, teacher. Maybe linked to teacher Veronica's question. From your, or based in your experience and your knowledge and background, as you said, why do you think that involve them culturally means so much? What makes the difference? Why is it so important to adapt our curricula to, I mean, in terms of culture? What makes the difference? Why is it important?
Good question. Because I don't want to limit my students. Wherever you are right now, I have no idea who is sitting in this class or this room or anywhere that I am who's going to be doing different things. And even if that person never leaves that town, they never leave that country, they will meet other people from other places. And I think we've all learned since the pandemic that this world is really small. So even virtually, you have no idea who you're going to meet. And so you are a cultural ambassador of where you're from. So in preparation for whatever the world is going to bring you, the more languages we know, the more important it is. And that's just not just the words that we say, but another lesson we talk about in class is body language. So you might have the right words, but if you're like this, what is that telling the speaker? Or if they come to class, or sometimes when you learn about handshake, and I remember someone shaking my hand like this. And I talked about it, I said in some cultures that might be acceptable, but here, where we were living, you want a firm handshake. In Texas, people like people who are strong and independent. That's what they respect. So we have to adapt to wherever we are. So one reason why it's important to learn these things is because we don't want to limit our students to think that you're only staying here. Again, it goes back to how you think, right? So if you're thinking small and you're thinking this is it for this kid, then you're not going to try anything. But if you know that this person has the potential to do amazing things, you don't want them to be limited. You want them to be prepared to live in this culture, but also any place else they go, they can hold their head up high. They can communicate with others and find out how to communicate with others.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Floribeth Cambronero. And my question is, how can I transform teaching practices in the EFL classroom when I have talented students? What I mean is that I have students whose English level is higher from the rest. How can I transform my teaching practices?
They can help be teachers in the class. It doesn't have to be just you. Imagine if you have a class where you have them in different stations. If you have students who are more proficient in the class, that just helps you. They can lead some of these groups in the class. They can listen, because then they're practicing their own listening skills and also learning soft skills, how to agree and disagree, but also how to correct people respectfully is another skill that they're learning, because they're going to have to disagree and agree with people in the future as well. So asking them to be helpers and not just wipe the board, copy this. No. Really engaging and being a leader in a group in different things that are happening and assigning maybe some of the more complex things we talked about. Let me go back. I know, I made this a little bit
No
more.
more questions? We have another one? Okay.
Let me see if I can find it. Differentiating. I mentioned that I had a class where I had more advanced students and some who were not so advanced. So one group A students, they're finding the price. That just means that they're learning to read the menu. The second group can find the least, comparative, while the third group has to negotiate and figure out what is the best option for a healthy meal. So those are some ways to do that when you have more advanced students in the class and some who need more time, but you're still using the same material.
Well, good
morning.
You can listen to me? Okay.
I can hear you.
My name is Gisette, and I would like you to give me a piece of advice on how can we implement into your, I don't know how to call it, topic, artificial intelligence without losing, right, what you were talking about, our own authenticity.
When you're saying using artificial intelligence, meaning in terms of your preparation or the students you... Well, this is where I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know that I can answer both of those questions right now. I'm going to have to sit and listen to the next plenary so I can learn some things. In terms of I'm just being honest, in terms of my preparation, I learned about a couple of different apps that I've used. There's one that I just discovered. I haven't had time to play with it, but we all are familiar with ChatGPT, which is just general. But the thing about it is that algorithm is based on a Western perspective, so a lot of the statistics are one view. There are some other apps out there that are more specific to teachers where you can put in the topic, the level of students, the material that you're using, the vocabulary. So I'm playing with that now. Perhaps if I'm invited another time, I can talk about it, but at this time I cannot. I'm just being honest. Hello.
Yeah, okay, yeah, now it is. I loved your presentation. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. My name is Carmen. I just wanted to say, in the career, we are studying how to educate for peace and help our students to find peace among them and solve conflicts in an alternative way. And I just loved it. You know, I think it's a material that everybody should know, how to solve conflicts without violence. And I just wanted to ask if you have had some experience with that in a real environment, or, you know, to teach your students in a real situation how to solve problems in an alternative way. Thank you.
There are many problems that we've talked about in class. Off the top of my head, and most recently, I had a conversation this week with my English club, and the first topic was cell phone usage. That was my topic. So then I asked them to come up with their own topic, because what I did is I had one group that was presenting positive and negative. There was another group that would ask questions, so they were the interviewers, and the third group were the note takers. And so they would report back what was going on. And when I asked them, what topic would you like to discuss, they wanted to talk about teachers and their teaching methods and strategies. And I thought, oh wow, let me hear this. So they discussed what teachers use and how they felt about it. And one thing is, I remember one group said, well, I don't like that when I ask teacher how to do something, if I don't understand it, they get frustrated, they don't want to answer me, they tell me I'm a bad student. And I thought, And on the other flip side, another student had said, well, at the same time, teachers are helpful, because if I want to be able to learn the skills I need for a future profession in university, they can help me. So it's important for me to listen to them. And basically what they were saying is that it would be helpful for teachers to contextualize the material to what they need for their future, which is really what we're talking about here. So I asked them, what are some ways that you can solve this problem? They said, well, we could talk to the teacher. And I said in front of the class, I'm like, no, one-on-one afterwards, and say, I need more help. I said, that's a lot more respectful. And they said, if that doesn't work, and they've tried multiple times, then perhaps speaking to the leadership to say, hey, I'm having trouble with this. Can you please help me? So these are suggestions that they came up with as we talked about agreeing and disagreeing and respect. And so they came up with this different levels of communication and who to talk to and how and why. So giving them a chance to practice that, it's really helpful to hear where they're coming from and where they're probably going a little bit too far left, asking them questions on, is this respectful? How would that person feel hearing you communicate this way? Would it work in front of, would it work in front of a class, or would it be better one-on-one? So things like that.
Again, thanks everyone for your questions, and thanks Ms. Lubin. Now, before we let you go, we would like to give you a little token of our appreciation and a thank you note. And the note says, Vicerrectoría Académica, Escuela de Ciencias Sociales y Humanidades, otorga el presente certificado de agradecimiento a Dr. Pearlie Lubin in recognition for a valuable and significant contribution to the VIII Seminar for English Teaching Professionals, Transforming Teaching Practices in the EFL Classroom. So thank you very much, and let's give a... Okay, so now we invite you to move to the cafeteria. I know this is one of the most expected moments of the seminar, where you will be able to enjoy a delightful breakfast. So you have, remember to have your coffee break tickets handy, and you can leave your belongings here in the room. It will be closed and supervised, so don't worry. So go ahead, and we would really appreciate if you returned at 10:30 to the room to continue with the next workshop as scheduled.